Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Catholic Buzz, episode 6. And today we have a special treat for you because we're going to be doing something a little bit different on the Catholic Buzz. But first, I'm Father Daniele, and joining me, as always, are my two favorite people in the whole world. Over here, I have Josh Sullivan.
Hello.
Josh, I spent all last week thinking about those delicious brownies.
They were good, were they not?
Yeah,
they're amazing.
So good. Yeah. And of course, over to my right, he is the debate team champion from 1999 to 2002. Matt Van Milligan, welcome to you.
Hello.
Yes, and so good to see you. How's your family doing this week?
Really well, yeah.
Yeah? Good. So we have something different we're doing this week. Anything exciting first before we get into our change up?
No, I'm just happy that we're allowed outside.
Yeah.
That was really nice this week. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the rules are on golfing and if we can go.
Yeah.
Like, can we go?
Yes.
If you want to golf.
Yeah, it's a good question. It just depends if you want to use the golf course or not. You're allowed to use Crown land for hikes or anything else. So you can just make your own golf field in the middle of the forest. Go for a gopher hole. The way the Scots used to do it.
Okay, so we've been getting a lot of questions online that people have all these sorts of questions about the Catholic faith and for our experts, Josh and Matt. So today, what we decided to do, instead of tackling one topic, we're going to tackle a bunch of them in a speed round. So we've compiled all your questions into this nice little collection basket that Josh is holding. And we're going to try and answer these questions in 2 minutes or less and then move to the next question. Now, let us just say that some of these questions need a little more time to have a good in-depth answer to them, but we're just going to touch the surface on some of them right now. So if you have any follow-up questions or comments, you can let us know. But at least we're going to broach some of your questions that we've got so far. Okay, so you guys know the rules. We have 2 minutes to answer a question, whether you've seen these before or not. And I think we're going to get a warning bell at a minute 45.
Oh, yeah, okay.
To wrap, you have 15 seconds to wrap up. Now, I think anyone can join in, Matt?
Yep.
You can cut in or whatever, add and disagree if you would like, right?
Okay.
So I'm excited. This is kind of fun.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm worried to see what's in there, but
It'll be exciting.
I hope so.
Are we ready to get started?
I think so.
Okay, first question. Ooh. Okay, can a non-Catholic get married at the church, and can a Catholic get married outside the church?
Wow, that's a good question.
That's a great question.
Yeah, starting with a nice light one.
Yeah. Okay, this is what I know. I know that a Catholic has to get married on sacred ground because it is a Catholic sacrament. Is that correct? So it has to get. You don't have to get married in church though. You could get married in a graveyard, correct? Because that's still holy sacred ground.
I don't know about that.
Oh no? Okay.
Josh.
I was wondering about that. Because it's still sacred ground. It's still blessed ground.
It's consecrated space.
It's still consecrated space.
Yeah,
Can you?
so a Catholic...
I don't know why you'd want to get married in a graveyard. But
Is there another question in there that says, would you like to get married in a graveyard?
that's the big question.
That's maybe a whole other episode.
Yeah.
Okay. So can a Catholic get married?
So a Catholic should be married inside the Catholic Church. If he's going to get married to a non-Catholic outside of the church, let's say in another Christian denomination or another faith, he can ask permission from his bishop or her bishop to get that permission to be married outside of the church. Okay? Now, a non-Catholic being married in the Catholic Church, only if they're marrying a Catholic.
Yeah.
So two non-Catholics can't be married in the church. But a non-Catholic who marries a Catholic can, of course.
And they usually have to undergo some preparation.
For sure. There's preparation. There's meetings with your pastor. There's different things to do. Can you get married in a graveyard? I never heard that in my life.
Because it's sacred ground. So my understanding was you had to get married on sacred ground, and which is why the church grounds count. But then also, the only other sacred ground that I know of is holy
ground. That's so funny. I know people say, can we get married down at the beach? Or can my priest come and marry us at the beach? No, you have to be married inside the church, and you don't have permission to be married out there. Now, there are extraordinary circumstances. I heard the bell, we're wrapping up, that you could get permission from the bishop to be married in a hospital. Let's say
Yes.
someone is marrying their fiance who's gone under an illness, they're passing away, extraordinary circumstance, to be married before they pass away. The bishop gives permission to get married in a hospital room.
Okay.
But that's rare.
Rare. Yeah. Special.
Whew, we did that, not bad,
Yeah,
eh? For
yeah.
the first one.
The next question. This is another hard one. Why are there two Bibles, Catholic and Protestant?
For that question, I think we just turn to Matt.
Because I'm the expert on
You're the expert.
deuterocanonical texts.
Yeah.
No, so there's a problem with the question. There are three Bibles. No. So yeah, typically people are referring to kind of the Catholic and Protestant Bibles, but the Eastern Orthodox Bible has an extra book of Maccabees, I believe. But that's a whole other can of worms. But the long story short is that the Bible itself is derived from a number of other pre-existing texts, earlier translations, the Septuagint, the Vulgate, and it was a council that decided what the canon of Scripture was going to be. So those are the Bible, the Catholic Bible as we know it, are the canonical texts that were arrived at by that council, and then books were removed at a later date in Protestant Bibles because there was some concern about whether or not those texts existed in their original form in either Hebrew or Greek at the time of that the apostles would have known about these, or that they would have informed the early church. It's noteworthy that in the 20th century, with the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, a lot of
Those scrolls
biblical
were found.
history. A lot of those original versions were found to support the idea that those do actually belong.
When would they have
in the
been
canon of
removed?
Scripture.
Like around the Reformation?
Yeah.
Or okay.
Yeah.
I believe too that it was actually there was a change talking about the book. Okay, this is a whole episode worth. But
Sorry, I took the entire time budget.
Change the whole Bible. Was the talk at that time, because there's specific texts and stuff, and then there was discussion that no, we're just going to take the one. We need a legit reason to remove the text, and the legit reason, from what I understand, was we don't have the Aramaic or the Greek translations. We only have the Latin translations, and so we're not going on. We're going to only take the text that we have the Greek and Aramaic translations for, and so they did, and that left 9 books out. But like you said, the Dead Sea Scrolls found those 9 books, and so there's no reason now necessarily to have those 2.
So a Catholic should look for a Bible that says
Catholic.
Catholic edition.
Yeah.
If anything, it's the full Bible.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next question. Okay, right here. Can non-Catholics or non-baptized have a Catholic funeral?
Oh my goodness.
Ooh.
Okay. So yes. My answer to that is yes. A non-Catholic or someone who's not baptized can have a funeral in the Catholic Church.
A funeral is not a sacrament, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's actually a work of mercy.
Yeah.
So the prayers at a funeral mass are really directed towards having mercy on the person so that the Lord welcomes them into heaven.
Yeah.
Right? So we can do this for a non-Catholic person or a non-baptized. And actually, the funeral rites of the Catholic Church have specific prayers for non-baptized or so yes, of course.
So
People
now-
think that they have to be Catholic to have a Catholic funeral. That's not the case.
I heard at some time in the past, so another question to add to that, like follow-up, non-Catholics couldn't be buried in a Catholic cemetery. That was a long time ago.
Buried.
Buried
I thought you
in a
said
Catholic...
married. I thought we
No,
were
no,
back
no,
to-
no.
Did you hear married?
We've
No,
already
buried in a
addressed
Catholic cemetery. So is that still the case, or is that still, is it because of sacred ground, or so non-Catholics, are they allowed to be buried in a Catholic cemetery?
Yeah, that's so true. And that's kind of foreign to me. I think it was before my existence on this earth, maybe. I remember in a city I was living in before, in Sault Ste. Marie, there was the Catholic cemetery on this side of the
Exactly.
road and the Protestant cemetery on this side of the road. I mean, yeah, now you can bury wherever, but still people have that perception, like, oh, the Catholics on this side of the road. And there's stories about people being buried like close to the fence, so that their the
Ones
Catholic
are
loved
close.
one and the Protestant loved one are at least close to each other in death.
You still bless the ground when you're burying
Absolutely. Every
So-
time you have a rite of committal, which is to commit the body to the ground, the priest blesses the area.
So it's still sacred ground.
It's sacred
Yeah.
ground.
Okay, perfect.
For sure. Good question.
Yeah, that's a great one. All right.
I get nervous every time you go in that basket.
Yeah.
Is the Pope ever wrong? Ooh, big one. In the history of popes, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I think
Pope
that's
is a man.
That's a good question because a lot of people just think because the teaching on infallibility, for example, people automatically assume that we believe the Pope is infallible.
Yeah.
But
Every word.
every word he says is infallible. But that's not true. The Pope can choose to speak infallibly on a issue, but he rarely
Yeah.
does that.
Yeah.
Eh?
Yeah, so like actually invoking the charism of infallibility that's given specifically and exclusively to the Pope is something that, is almost never done.
Isn't there something to do with a chair and stuff?
Yeah,
too?
ex cathedra, so from the chair of Peter.
Okay, yeah.
So they need to make an ex cathedra statement and declare it on behalf of the whole church, and declare it as such. To invoke that specific charism of infallibility, but that doesn't translate into everything that the Pope says is 100% accurate all the time. That said, that the office of Pope should be accorded a specific respect, and we should take the weight of what the Pope says, even on an airplane or in a daily homily, or just as
That's what I was gonna
with a certain and I would say great kind of measure of respect.
It's amazing as we get into this more technical age, the news media grabs things, especially Pope Francis, that Pope Francis says, and then twists them. Like the big famous one is all dogs go to heaven. And what did he say? And if you actually look at the text and what he actually said, was a small girl asking, is her dog going to be there when she goes to heaven, when she dies and stuff? And the Pope's answer wasn't all dogs go to heaven. His answer was, you will have everything you need in heaven. Something along those lines. So the girl could take that response in her young mind to meaning that her dog's going to be there, and even the media took it that way. But that's not what he was saying. Everything you need is in heaven. You know what I mean? Something along those lines. So anyways, kind of great question. Sorry.
That's good. So that was a good question. Yeah, I like that because I think that's a big misconception of people, even from the outside looking into the Catholic Church, that we believe everything the Pope says is infallible. So thanks for that.
Okay, great question actually to follow this up. As Catholics, do we have to believe in everything that the Catholic Church teaches? Ooh, that's a deep one.
Yeah.
That is a deep one. And what I would say is that we are called to do our best to follow and believe what the church teaches on all subjects. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that's a struggle. Mm-hmm. Like there are certain teachings of the Catholic Church that people struggle with. That's not to say that because we struggle with them or find it hard that we should just throw it out.
No.
Right? Because we believe that there's value that Christ has given purpose to the teachings of his church, right? Like I have a copy of the Catechism here. That's a thick book full of things. Are people going to agree or believe everything that's in here? No, of course not. There's some struggle there. Hey, would you?
There's a definite struggle, and like from a catechetical perspective, different teachings of the church have different kind of authoritative weight, or that. So on the level of dogma, like. Yes, if you're a believing Catholic, or if you self-identify as a Catholic, you believe, or you give some creed to belief in that. At the level of doctrine, the Catechism, the 92 Catechism, was published as a summary of doctrine. So this is a summary of the collective teachings of the Church. So again, you would expect some level of agreement, or at least deference to.
Right.
This is what the church teaches, and I'm part of this church. The other thing to say is that the faithful. Okay, yeah. So
there's discipline.
And talking about the difference between what the church teaches. Oh, there's the timer. I'm not really good at short answers. Yes. So the faithful are obliged to take seriously and give due consideration to what the church teaches. If the church teaches something as wrong or as false, there is an obligation on the faithful to reject that.
Correct that. Yeah. So from my understanding too. So dogma, yes. Doctrine, yes. Discipline, and this is where I think a lot of people like discipline, not necessarily. You don't. Discipline is that offshoot of specific orders or specific religious believe a specific thing. Louis de Montfort perhaps would be one of those things, the Litany to Mary and all those other things. Like if you do this, then this happens, or whatever the case may be. Those aren't things that the Catholic Church, they say these are good practices, but they don't say you have to believe this to be Catholic.
Absolutely.
Now, just to wrap up, one of the things I heard one priest say one time was, if you don't, like the Catechism of the Catholic Church, if you don't, like let's say you don't believe in gay marriage, what the church teaches on gay marriage, then you rip out that piece from the catechism. Is this the catechism of the Catholic Church? No, it's not. It's Josh's catechism of the Catholic Church. It's not the full catechism of the Catholic Church. So you're supposed to believe everything that's in the doctrine and dogma. But like you said, Father, you'd have a hard time with it, and maybe that's something like wrestling with it. I know my wife, being Protestant, becoming Catholic, some specific teachings on purgatory, Mary, she wrestled with for quite a while, but actually through a lot of prayer and a lot of discernment, she actually got.
And I think there's value to wrestling with teachings of the church.
Yeah, certainly.
You know, like we were going way overboard with this
I know.
question, but
It's a deep one.
But one final point is, for me, who was raised Catholic, you know, you kind of just sort of hear about these things and take them for granted. Matt, your experience of becoming Catholic, you really delved into it.
And overcomplicating everything.
Overcomplicated everything. But there's some value in that.
Wrestling, yeah.
Wrestling and really understanding what the church teaches.
Can I sum up that? The Israelites were called Israelites, right? And Israel is meaning wrestle with God. It's from Jacob wrestling, now called Israel, wrestling with God. And so the Israelites wrestled with God. And so that's what we're supposed, like that's our tradition, right? And so
those are the people chosen, right? To wrestle
chosen
with
people.
God.
All right.
Well, we did not bad there. That was a 20-minute answer.
Okay. Woo. Can Catholics receive communion at Protestant churches and or vice versa?
Whoa.
There's been some controversial teachings on this. So
For sure.
let's tell you what the Bible says, what the Catechism says.
So, right off the bat, a simple answer is, can Catholics receive communion at a Protestant church? No. And can Protestants receive the Eucharist at Catholic Mass? No. Okay? That's the answer. Here's why. We as Catholics believe the Eucharist is the real body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, right? And to get to that moment of where we have the Eucharist, it's not just an isolated thing, an isolated teaching of the church. No. We believe in the church, in the tradition, in our Lord, who provides for us that Eucharist, right?
The communion of faith.
Exactly, and everything involved with that. So a Protestant at a Catholic Mass who doesn't believe or assent to that is kind of going against their own conscience by receiving the Eucharist. Also, there's an issue of not understanding what it is and going through the preparation and all that stuff. But really, just if you're at a wedding or a funeral and everyone's going up to receive the Eucharist, you should not, as a Protestant, receive the Eucharist at a Catholic Mass. The same being, and stop me if you want to add something, the same being for a Catholic who attends a funeral or a wedding at a Protestant church, because we have this rich sacrament, the real body, blood, soul, divinity of Jesus at Mass, and we truly believe that the Eucharist is consecrated at our Mass, that's not the belief of the Protestant tradition. And so to respect our tradition, we shouldn't participate in their communion offering. Is that
you're not in communion with the Protestant church.
Exactly.
So why would you receive? Yeah.
And I think that's a really good question, and I think there's a lot of confusion there because that's a good point. People think, well, I don't want to stand out.
Exactly.
I want to be in solidarity with everyone and just go with the flow here. But really, that's not the correct thing to do. The correct thing to do for Catholics is to not receive the communion offering at a Protestant service, and for Protestants to respect our tradition by not receiving the Eucharist at a Catholic Mass. Yeah.
Really quick before we wrap that one up, what is the sign for non-Catholics to go up to communion? They want to still be in some sort of solidarity, but they don't, they don't want to sit in their seat. What would they do to prove?
So, for example, at funerals and weddings, I always say, for those of you who are not part of the Catholic tradition, I invite you to come forward for a blessing. Yeah. Indicate this to me by crossing your arms over your chest, okay? Or you're also free to remain standing in your pew.
Yeah.
So you give people options. They can stay in their pew, or they can come up for a blessing if they would like to come up.
So that seems to be the universal tradition too, right? Is put it crossing your hands at any church
Right.
that you're at. If you're doing that, you're walking up. Most people understand that to meaning that you're not, like most priests will understand you're not receiving communion at that time.
For sure.
Because even Catholics that are maybe not in the right state can do that. Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a whole
Other
thing,
topic.
yeah.
Okay. Next question. Why do we use incense?
Matt, I talked the entire last question.
So Matt, why do we
incense
use
is all
incense?
you.
And I need to work on short answers. So
We're giving you practice.
yeah. So the practical reason years ago, or like a lot of the development of the practice was, pretty pragmatic. That in the Middle Ages, Mass was a lot of people, and a lot of people together who don't bathe regularly creates a certain smell. So. There's that on that layer.
Yeah.
You want the place where a bunch of people are gathering to smell nice.
Yeah.
On kind of a liturgical or even biblical symbolic layer, the practice of sacrificing a lamb and the burnt offering and the aromas coming off of that as being
Smoke raising up.
an offering to God. So it's taken on that significance. So it's kind of operating, those two levels operating in parallel, that it's taken on a sacrificial or kind of, offering significance.
So it's mostly symbolic. It's mostly symbolic in a way. In
yeah,
liturgical.
people bathe a lot more now.
Yeah. But I mean, like you said, smoke going up, and especially at a time where we didn't have airplanes or balloons or anything else, like going up to where God was.
Yeah.
And so it was a way of getting our prayers up there. Can our prayers rise to God without incense?
All right. Well,
Hopefully. I'm asking, but I
if we're
know
not
the answer.
invoking an Aristotelian worldview that like heaven actually isn't directly
Above us.
Yeah.
All right. Next question.
Sure.
Okay. Off a faith topic. What are you currently watching on Netflix?
What am I? I do have a quick answer for this.
Okay.
So my wife and I just finished a series about soccer in England in the 19th century called The English Game. It's really, really good. And that's the only thing we've watched in the last
Is that worth your subscription?
couple
That's
months.
the only thing you've watched?
No, we've lost money on our
Yeah.
Netflix subscription. Yeah.
I must say, I purchased Netflix back in August of last year and just started watching it during the isolation period.
Now that you have time.
I've never watched it before. Right now, what am I currently watching on Netflix? I'm watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yes, of course.
I love it. It makes me laugh. I laugh at my TV. That's
For the family, for me, the two that I'm watching, Peaky Blinders. Love Peaky Blinders.
Really?
Yeah, I really do. The Irish mobster kind of thing. And I'm Irish too, so that kind of, I don't know why, they're gypsy, but they got Irish blood. Anyways, and also for like kind of smooth lay down, if you're a family guy of some sorts, not Family Guy, but if you're a family man or a husband, wife, Life in Pieces. Love that show. Yeah, really, really laughed hard.
Okay, this might be old to bring up, but everyone asks me if I've seen The Two Popes on Netflix.
And okay, yes.
And what I thought about it.
Yeah.
And what I thought, because everyone's like, it's such a lovely movie. And it is a lovely movie if you're just looking at,
Movie.
yes, like two men sort of seeing each other's point of view at the end of their lives and being inspired. But I thought it was a little unfair to Pope Benedict and making him seem like he was a crusty old man who was angry at the world, when that's not Pope Benedict.
It's like
at
the
all.
media's view of Pope Benedict. Does that make sense? Like they
Yeah.
love Pope Francis, but they hate Pope Benedict.
I thought it was a bit unfair.
Yeah, okay. Good to know. I haven't seen it yet, but I heard. That's
I
good.
haven't seen it either.
All right. Was Jesus really born on December 25th?
No.
No.
Yeah.
That's the easy answer, right?
Next, no, I'm just kidding.
I'm not a huge fan of just kind of applying the historical critical method directly to scriptural studies.
Yeah.
But I'm going to do it. There's a lot of kind of biblical scholarship that suggests that he was born around October-ish. And the evidence for that is that they actually know the cycles of when people served in the temple. So Zechariah served in the temple at a certain time, and they were able to give an approximation of when John the Baptist was conceived. and then you have that cycle to Mary's visitation to Elizabeth. And then from that, you have the birth of Christ, and they put that around October.
Yeah, that is cool.
See, I heard April, May, and that's actually when going with the suns and going with the astronomical studying of the planets and everything else. Because again, the same thing that they can reproduce and go back to 2,000 years. And if you're looking at it, there's actually a time where I think it's Saturn and Jupiter, as well as one other star, but one was ruler, had the astronomical understanding of ruler, and the other one was the people of Judah, and so it was the Israelites, and those two stars collided in the sky, and so it was actually the two stars coming close together was one really bright star for about a month, and so for people that would have been studying the star, that would have said for about a month, they see Judah, like people of Israel, as well as ruler coming together. There's going to be a ruler born in Israel, and so at that time, but I mean, it still collides because we know that the wise men didn't necessarily visit Mary and Jesus and everything else the day that he was born, but maybe probably more likely a couple months or at least even a year or two after. So, you know what I mean? But yeah, interesting. So it wasn't December 25th. December 25th was because, do we know?
Well, it's the day that the church marks it as a celebration.
Yeah, something to do with the winter solstice too, and celebration, and there was a big celebration with winter solstice. That's what I heard anyways, I don't know.
Well, it's the date that's set out in the church calendar. I mean, and we're based around that date. Even March 25th is 9 months before December 25th.
Exactly,
So we
yeah.
celebrate the Annunciation. You know, there's a lot of feast days on days.
But realistically, that's not necessarily
The day
date.
that Jesus was born.
We know this as a Catholic Church. That's not
Exactly.
the day that we proclaim that he was born in the
It's
year
the day we
00.
celebrate his birth.
It's just the year we celebrate. Okay. All right, next question. I like this one, actually. This is a good question. Can we eat meat on Fridays during the year?
Okay, so you guys are looking at me. So the Catechism, so the Church identifies specific penitential times. So those are the season of Lent and Fridays throughout the year. So those are the penitential times identified by the Church. So traditionally and typically, the expectation is that you don't eat meat. You fast from meat on penitential days. So the sort of like strict traditional historical answer is no, we don't eat meat. It is up to the discretion of the bishops and the conferences that kind of decide these things. So a lot of conferences, dioceses, bishops, they say that you're required to make, if you're not eating meat or if you have a legitimate reason for not eating meat, there are people who aren't bound to the normal kind of fasting requirements that follow days of penitence. Sometimes they'll ask that you offer something else instead. But I think strictly speaking, you are supposed to be properly dispensed, or like if there isn't
From the bishop.
and if there isn't something specific that they've said, then generally the expectation is you're not supposed to.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Like the normal course is every Friday of the year, we're not supposed to eat meat. The Canadian bishops have said we can replace that with an act of charity. But I still think during Lent, you can't replace it with an act of charity.
No.
During Lent is a strict time where we do not eat meat on Fridays. And the bishops haven't said anything very clear on that, but more so than
In the United States, what the bishops have said about it, and I think it kind of slowly translated into Canada, was at that time, people lived close to the coast, and it was easy to eat fish on Fridays for your source of protein versus eating the meat and stuff. But as you got closer to big continents like North America, in the middle, there may be not so many lakes and streams and everything else that you could just necessarily fish from. So the bishops at around certain times said, okay, in these areas, you don't necessarily have to fast from meat, but you have to do something in place of, because we realize that there is maybe not fish available to you, like not fresh fish or not fish that you can actually eat available to you. And then that slowly kind of make their way to the coast. So it's all of United States, as well as it kind of leaked into Canada. And so I think they haven't been very clear on that front.
Right.
But just so that we are clear, Friday is still, if you do eat meat, you are supposed to do some sort of act, right?
Exactly, unless it's a solemnity. If it's a feast day, solemnity, you're not supposed to fast on those days, right? So yes. And I think it's important to remember, sorry we're going long on this, but it's important to remember why. On Fridays, we still recognize that's the day Jesus, our Lord, our Savior, our God, left this earth, died on the cross, gave up his flesh. And so we remember that every Friday, just like every Sunday, we celebrate the resurrection. We celebrate
3 days later.
Every Friday, we're to call to mind the sacrifice Jesus made for us. And we give up fleshy foods because he gave up his flesh for us.
Yeah, and it's a way of actually giving yourself, taking control of your fleshly
reminding
desires.
us of that sacrifice.
That's great.
I think our last question. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. In a pilgrimage, I saw a lot of people kneeling and praying in front of a statue and pictures. How can I explain this to a Christian who say we worship idols? It's one of the misconceptions, I think. We see a lot of pictures of Catholics, especially on pilgrimages and stuff, kneeling in front of a picture, an icon, even in our churches with candles lit in front of a statue. And I think people can misconstrue that to being that they're praying to the statue or praying to what the statue represents. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what do we say to that?
Well, I always call to mind, the easiest way I can explain it is the communion of saints. Like whether people are in heaven with the Lord or here with us, just like I ask you to pray for me, you to pray for me, I think Matt's prayers bear more weight with the Lord. I also ask those who are in heaven to pray for me as well. And so to kneel before is not idol worship, but to really get that support from these people who have lived the Christian faith, who have struggled through it, who are in the presence of God right now, because they're canonized saints, so we know that they're in heaven. And so I'm asking for them to pray for me, to support me, to intercede to the Lord for me.
So just to be clear, the statue
Yes.
has nothing to do with why you're praying.
The statue brings my focus to the person I'm asking to pray for me, just like I'm looking at you. I'm saying, Josh, pray for me.
Exactly.
Looking at the statue helps me to ask Mary to intercede for me, St. Anthony to help me, all those different
So
things.
like my mom's passed away, I may look at a picture of my mom. My mom's not the picture, right?
Exactly.
And has no power, but I might look at a picture to remind me to say, Mom, I need you to pray for me. That kind of thing.
This may be the subject of a whole other podcast because I feel like we're actually
Yes,
already out of time.
okay,
But without going into the details of like the iconoclasm movement, and because historically in the church, this has been a big kind of concern, and for the reasons I brought up a couple weeks ago about Mary, people having legitimate concerns about not wanting to commit idolatry. Yes. You can walk people through the steps to say that you're not actually venerating the statue. The statue or the icon is a placeholder because you don't have kind of a perfect, representation of who this person is. It helps you carry the idea. It helps you bring a visual reference to the person you're actually asking for intercession for, or in the case of a statue of Jesus, this is something that helps you remember the Good Friday sacrifice. This is something that helps you remember the crucifixion. This is something that helps you remember the resurrection. And clearly distinguish that between the kind of idol worship that was going on in the ancient world.
And it's like a golden cow.
But the statue was the god.
Yeah.
The statue was the
That
manifestation of the deity on earth. And even from like the early Christian traditions, there was a sharp differentiation from that practice.
And I think too, people kneeling in front of, like we said, kneeling in front of the fallen soldier, kneeling in front of, like people can say prayers in front of statues, not actually like praying to God, but not praying through the statue or through, I've seen a lot of people kneeling at a cemetery or kneeling, those kind of things too.
Yeah.
So,
on that note, we're way over time. But this was fun to answer all these questions. We did pretty well, I feel.
I think we got through half of them.
Oh, half of them.
We're going to have another speed round.
Okay, we'll have to do a little more speed rounds in the future. If you have any more questions for us, keep sending them to us. We're happy to answer them. Send them to our email address, thecatholicbuzzpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for the speed round, guys. It was tons of fun. For Josh Sullivan and Matt Van Milligan, I'm Father Daniele. We'll see you next time on The Catholic Buzz.